In previous videos, we started by considering the application we want to achieve in execution. Then we studied the overall features of smart device applications and moved on to the conceptual model and the underlying objects. And now the time has come to see it all in practice. In this video, we will build the web application from scratch, prototyping in the cloud. And in the following video, we will continue working to add the portion for smart devices. You could skip this video if you wish to go directly to the implementation for smart devices. So, to start building our application, EventDay, we begin by creating a KB from scratch. EventDays, and we will leave the predefined environment Ruby as default, and then in the practice lesson we will use .NET. Then we create the KB. Note that we get the common API folders with a pair of general web objects, already known, Smart Devices API, which for the time being only have 2 objects, and then we will see how it's populated with more objects from this folder. And Web API. Going to the domains, we see that it has these domains predefined, including time, address, email, geolocation, phone, which we will use in our smart device applications, are known as Semantic Domains. We can see how, by default, the Deploy to Cloud property of the default web generator appears in No. We change it to Yes, and this is how we will prototype in the cloud. Here we see where the cloud URL is located. And here is the virtual directory. Let's start by creating our first transactions. The country transaction with identifier country ID domain we are defining, number of 8. We will define for the attribute to be auto-numbered, and then we define country name of domain name varchar with 20. And country fly to store the country flag of the image type. We save. And now we define the mySpeaker transaction. We then define the speaker full name attribute of the varchar type with 60, which will be a formula attribute. Speaker surname, which we apply the trim method to in order to remove the blank spaces. Then we leave a space, and speaker name to have the speaker's full name. We then define the speaker image attribute to have the speaker's photo. Speaker CV mini to have a summarized resume. And then the speaker's country, with name inferred, and the phone. And note that it assumes the phone semantic domain, which we will see later in action. The speaker's address, and last, the speaker's email. Now we save. Let's also specify that the identifier be auto-numbered. Then we save again, and we will add the rules to this transaction. For example, the error rule that will be triggered when speaker name is empty. This other one, also an error rule, which will be triggered when the speaker's last name is empty. And a message, not an error, for when the speaker's resume is empty. And now we save. From this point on, we have two possible changes. We either focus on developing the web portion of the application, or we focus on developing its portion for smart devices, or there's the option of doing both in parallel. Let's start with the web portion. The first thing to do is go to the pattern section of this MySpeaker transaction and apply the work with for web pattern. We can see that here we have the corresponding instance file. If we go to folder view, we will see that here we have the MySpeaker object, and when we save under the object the instance file, as well as the objects that will implement the pattern, will be created. Here we see the instance file and the objects that implement it, the web panels and the web components. Likewise, then we go to the country transaction. In its patterns section, when we apply the work with for web, in the folder view, we will see both the instance file, which is not an object, and the objects that implement what this instance file says are all created. We also know that this web panel home has been created to invoke the two work withs. To initialize the two transactions with data, we import an EPZ which contains two initialization procedures. We will now load and import it. So, we go to Home, and in the start event, we invoke both procedures so as to simplify the load and avoid the need to do it manually. We then initialize the countries and initialize the speakers with data. Now we save. And now we're ready to test the web application, so we press F5. We create the tables in the database, which will be created in the database in the cloud. We can see how the application is uploaded to the cloud, and the developer menu is opened, containing then a link for each object. We'll execute the home, the object that created the work with pattern when applied. The start event must have been executed, and then the tables with data must have been loaded also. This is what is known to us. Now we want to start developing the application for smart devices. And that is what we will be doing in the next video.